Hi, I'm Blake Gray, and I am here today with Katherine Jarvis, the founder of Jarvis Communications in Los Angeles. It's a PR firm specializing in wine. Katherine has joined me today because we're going to talk about how to do PR during a pandemic, which is an interesting topic. Um, it occurred to me because I'm sure I'm not unique in this. I'm just deluged with PR outreach right now, more so than usual. And it's kind of hard to cut through it. But on the other hand, wineries got to sell wine, and in order to sell that wine, they got to market that wine, and they got to have PR for that wine. So it's a tricky time for PR people. So Katherine, thanks for joining us. Let's talk about how it is that you work with your clients in this period to try to get PR that's going to work for them.
Well, I have to say, Blake, I think that, by the way, thank you for having me on today. I think that we're all navigating this as something absolutely new. Nobody in our generation has ever experienced a pandemic like this. And so day by day, we're adjusting, we're changing the way we do things, and we're figuring that out on a day-to-day basis. I do think one of the most important things for any PR firm to be doing right now is to be listening, paying close attention to the stories that are out there, the tone that is out there, and how the world is feeling, and approaching everything they do with that in mind.
I mean, I came to having this idea of having a conversation with PR professional. And by the way, apologies to all my other PR professionals who I love for doing this with Katherine, and that you would also have been great. But I came to having this idea because I got some bad PR that I don't need to go into because I've already said everything I need to say on that topic. But I am curious, if you have a client who comes to you and they want to send something out, and you think this isn't going to be as well received as they think it's going to be, what do you tell them?
We actually haven't had that happen, which is fortunate. All of our clients are fairly long-term, and so we know each other very well. And I think that we're mostly on the same page as far as outreach. Our company's approach, with the help of my awesome team, which I couldn't be doing any of this without, we have said, okay, let's take everything off of the agendas that we had for these clients and reassess, and let's talk about what people are wanting to know about these days. So rather than sending a pitch to somebody and being a little tone deaf and not really looking at what that writer writes about or what their interests are, we are taking the approach of contacting each of our contacts and just seeing how we can help them in this situation. If they happen to be working on a story about virtual tastings or promotions that are happening, we have a slew of them that our clients and friends are doing, but we're not going to be kind of hammering that in if it's not something you're interested in writing about. So, I've always considered our media contacts to be our clients as well as our winery clients. So we have to think about exactly what is that person interested in talking about? Do they want to hear from us right now? And again, paying very close attention to what's going on around us.
Yeah, let's talk about the general world of PR, not even necessarily during the pandemic. How is it, explain to me how, when a client reaches out to you, they say they want to get more media attention, what is it that you do?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, we're going to help them identify their story if they don't have that already. A lot of family-owned wineries, which is what our focus is, focus on everything that they're doing in agriculture, in the vineyards, the tasting room. But they often have so many great stories to tell that haven't been told and could be of interest to other people. So we ask them so many questions. That process takes a really long time, that kind of getting to know you. And then we take those highlights and we might pitch those as stories to different journalists. That could be, for instance, a lot of our clients have participated in the Napa Restoration Project, which is a big sustainability project in the Napa Valley. And we've found great stories through that. Or Maybe a client has a really interesting personal story that they have to present. For instance, one of our clients, Mi Sueño, headed by Rolando Herrera, he came to this country into the Napa Valley as a Mexican immigrant. And we talk a lot about the struggles that he had when he was coming in and how he's been able to overcome those, which are definitely inspiring in a time like right now to talk to him. And he's been through this before in his own way.
I appreciate, and I realize that a mistake I have in inviting you on is because I've dealt with you for some time and I don't get a lot of bad PR from you. So it makes it harder for me to talk about the bad PR. So you're talking about, I gotta say as a writer, you're talking about, see, when I get a pitch, and I too definitely turn PR pitches into stories, but I wanna see that what you're talking about, a family winery, and here's this interesting story about them. And I get all these pitches all the time that are like, we're releasing our new 2017 Cabernet. And,
Right, that's not necessarily a story. So, Blake, one of the things that all of I do, and hopefully I know all of my team does, and I think a lot of my PR colleagues out there do, is they read a ton. We work with very curious people who have done usually a ton of research and are following what all of the media are talking about. And so they're not going to approach a journalist with $100 bottle of wine who's writing for a newspaper column. That's not appropriate for that audience. So some of our clients have many different story ideas that work with many different outlets or writers, while others are much more focused. But I think the key thing here with all of us is to listen and to really pay attention.
Now let me ask you this, because I'm always curious about it. As a writer, I want to get, if I have a story, I want to have that story first. And I don't want to be working on the story and suddenly seeing it somewhere else. I mean, how do you do that? How do you decide we're going to pitch this story to Blake and this other story, this other writer, and this other story, this other writer?
That's exactly what we do. We might have a story or a newsworthy item that we want to put out there, and then we'll take a look at, okay, who's the best voice to tell this story? Who will want this story the most? And we will probably approach them with that first and give them an exclusive. So it's not the exact same thing everywhere.
Another question I have about is samples. Like, so one of the big things that probably, if you are not in the wine industry and you're hearing this now, it's going to be a shock to you, but writers don't pay for these wines. That an agency like yours will send samples of the wine, which we may or may not write about. So how do you decide which writers get which samples?
Well, we'll definitely back into that. We'll take a look at the distribution channels of our client, first of all. So we're working on a national basis. So we'll tailor make that kind of list of people based on where they're distributed, the price point of the wine, the availability, and the interest. We've been working in this for a long time, so we absolutely know if somebody's more interested in Italian wines or wines from Willamette versus maybe they're really into Santa Barbara Pinots. Everything that we do is very customized, and it's not a one-size-fits-all platform. And I think most PR firms hopefully who work in the niche wine business follow that same kind of policy.
Now, I want to ask you something about the samples, about specifically for me, because I always feel a little guilty if a big company offers to send me their wine for free, fine, they can afford it. But if it's some small winery, and I think, I'm interested in tasting the wine, but I'm not likely to turn this bottle of wine into a story. I feel a little guilty about asking for, or I shouldn't say asking for, because I will not ask for a sample unless I'm planning to write a story. But, you'll reach out and say, do you want to try this wine? Should I be accepting that wine if I'm not planning to write a story about it?
I would hope that anybody who is offered a sample would have an intention to consider writing about it. See a place somewhere in their life, in their world to include that. And I am positive that most of our of our media that we work with kind of think that way.
Yeah, it's a big, honestly, it's a big moral question for me. And the thing that drives me the most nuts about PR pitches is usually when they circle back around and ask again, because I looked at it, I'll usually look into it fairly deeply the first time, and then I won't, and if I decide not to respond, but the one that I'll often respond to differently is a sample request. Because, and I know
Right.
for your company a lot, actually, you'll send the first sample request and I'll think, well, maybe I'll give this to somebody who's going to write about it more. But then if you ask again, I think, well, they've got more wine, so okay, I'll take it. I mean, is that is that annoying? Should I still be saying no for that second request?
Well, I don't know what specific situations you're talking about, Blake, but I do think that, if you get the samples, you should hopefully taste the wine sooner than later and give feedback. And that feedback might be, hey, I don't have a place for this. But part of our jobs, and I think our main job as publicists, is to edify and just bring awareness to our clients. So I've had it happen so many times where that has just happened, where we've sent samples, nothing really happened, or maybe we even hosted somebody on a press trip. And 3 years later, they end up finding a story. And so when we're working with clients that are wineries, those relationships are layered and layered and layered as part of a long view on how this works. I don't think that unless there's something that's super innovative or newsworthy, I think PR splashes come and go pretty quickly in today's world of technology and kind of distractions. So I really believe in that long-term relationship development that can happen over a long period of time. And I think most of our winery clients would agree to that. So you shouldn't feel too guilty. But hopefully you've given some feedback, even if it's just an email to the person that worked with you on that and said, hey, I really liked these. I don't have a place for them, but I'll keep them in mind for the future.
Yeah, well, you talk about long term. I mean, and this does happen as a writer. In December, I got a couple of, fairly last minute, write this story on U.S. sparkling wine was one in which I didn't have a chance to ask for all the samples that I might want. So had to recommend things that I'd already tried in the past. Another,
Right.
I'm doing an interview later today with somebody who's been sending me samples of her wine for 3 or 4 years. And I've been trying it and I like these wines, but I just never thought, well, I don't have a story I'm going to fit in. And I finally decided last week, you know what, those are good wines, and I'm just going to write a story about that. So, it is,
Exactly.
sometimes it does take a while. I'm curious, we have had one, I remember we had a long conversation one time about the nature of writing in a business, but now that we're doing this, this conversation, do you have questions for me that you'd like to know about the wine writing side of it?
Yes. I guess right now I'm curious of kind of how do you want to hear from publicists? Do you want to hear from them? What is interesting to you today to write about?
Well, it's probably, so it's a tricky thing for me because I just this morning the Wine Searcher last night published a story about Chianti Classicos that didn't have anything to do with the pandemic, and it's really the first
Right.
ordinary normal wine story since I've been sheltering in place that I've written, and I'm hoping that people aren't going to come and say, how dare you recommend these 17 Chianti Classicos to buy during this pandemic. But I think people need that. Wine sales are up. I saw that they're up like maybe 25%, I believe. So I think people need wine information. They want to know about wines more than ever. And moreover, something that I'm worried about is everybody's buying their wines at grocery stores, which means they're getting the same big company wines, which aren't the kind of wines that you and I love. By the way, little tangent here, something that I've learned from working with a lot of wine PR people over the years is that the good ones are all people who really know wine and love it and are knowledgeable about it. So the kind of wines that you and I would drink if we were going out to dinner together, they're not the ones that are going in a grocery store. So I feel like we need to keep working to try and keep these family wineries, artisanal wines, whatever, in front of people. So I would say that the kind of pitches that I want now aren't really that different from what I'd always want. And the companies that are good at it, and yours is one of them, but you're not the only one. But would be what you were saying before, like tell me a human story, or because I love the human story. Tell me a human story or something. I'm not a total technical nerd, but I'm a bit of a technical nerd. So tell me some winery that's doing something that nobody else is doing, because I always have a place for that. But same sort of stories I was interested in, I'm still interested in. What I'm less interested in than ever is self-congratulatory stuff. I mean, I don't know that I'm ever interested in that, but we got a silver medal at this wine competition in Hong Kong.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, I liked your Chianti piece. I think that, right now, take away everything that's going on, Chianti is coming off of some great vintages and is completely underrated as far as one of the great wine growing regions of the world. I think there's still a lot of value there, and I think people are looking for value right now. So if you say can't afford a first growth Burgundy or Bordeaux, which are still very expensive, and if you can afford them, definitely worth a while. But Chianti offers amazing value. A lot of times the reserve wines that you wrote about are starting to drink well because they've cellared them for some time. I think, if you look at something like the 16 vintage with Chianti, it's going to last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So I thought that.
But at the same time, a lot of them are approachable now. I really am a huge fan of Chianti Classico. I just think for value and for interest, I mean, they're wines that are pretty complex and they're food friendly. And, I could write about Chianti Classico all the time, but then there's so many other interesting wines in the world.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I think that, just kind of back to, the PR and relationships, I think that anybody who is thinking about doing PR needs to think of that long term and think about that relationship building over time, and not that quite immediate, what am I going to get out of this? It's not your normal transaction. You definitely have to have a lot of faith in the relationship and the approach. Because sometimes it does take a while. But I think I don't know, it can be a very rich experience.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I was thinking about, we were talking about this, is that I often am doing kind of wine news stories, and I need a quote on deadline from a winemaker who makes a wine or is in a region or whatever that relates. And I'm going to call somebody I know. And in fact, with these, these videos are a great example. Eventually, the longer I do these videos, the more I'll branch out. But the first ones, these are all, you are a person I know. I'm reaching out to people I know. So that's part of having a relationship, is that you don't know when that relationship is going to pay off. But maybe I'm going to call you at 1 o'clock and say, I need a quote right now about this issue. And then you get the story because we had that pre-existing relationship.
Right. I think that's true. And I think that's true too for wineries right now who, there's a lot of fear today about kind of what's going to happen tomorrow in the next couple of months. But the silver lining in this is relationships, both, from a PR firm to journalists calling and checking in, but also to wineries. I think that never before has there been a more important time to connect and get a deeper connection with your current connections. It's a hard time to get new clients, definitely, but or new customers. But I'm seeing that a lot of the wineries that we work with are becoming more innovative, definitely more technologically savvy. I think I've gotten used to Zoom this week, Blake, but a week ago I had no clue.
Yeah, me too.
Now I know how to do it for 100 people. So hopefully we'll all be, we'll come out of this definitely different, but we're going to come out of this hopefully better.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that we're all separated, but in a sense, we're closer. We're all in our own little cubby holes, but because of that, we're so lonely that we're reaching out.
Right. Have you done any of the kind of virtual tastings that are out there?
Nah.
Or happy hours, or?
Well, I have done a happy hour with a friend, and I intend to do it again. But virtual wine tastings were big in the They were big in the PR industry maybe 10 years ago. And I did a couple,
Yeah.
found them for me. Now, maybe for the average consumer, sure, but I don't like people telling me how the wine tastes. So, you know,
Right.
I'm that I perfectly, that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm tasting wine, you know, that I'm taking wine notes or anything. I, I just don't like people telling me how the wine tastes. So they're not, it's
Right.
not really for me. I want the winemaker to tell me how they made the wine. And oh my God, my number one question is almost always, you know, what is your philosophy? What are you thinking? Why, what are you trying to do? You know, I really want to know that from the winemaker, but I don't want you to tell me it tastes like blackberries. I can figure that out for myself.
No, I think that's actually happening quite a bit. Is that I've seen a ton of wineries, a few of our clients, and then several others actually doing vineyard tours. They're talking about how they make the wine. They're walking through their cellars, and I'm certainly learning a lot more from other wineries by paying attention to that. Because I agree with you, you don't need somebody to tell you how the wine tastes. You can be the judge of that.
Hmm. Yeah, well, you know, it's good. I'll probably have to watch more of these. I mean, maybe I'll have to have to start reporting on them. I saw this on this video, and therefore I've got this story going.
I
So,
was on one the other day, and what was super fun about it is that it was a small one, about 8 people. And what was so fun about it is because people were tasting the same wines together, but there was also a realization that a lot of the people on it had a Boston connection, and they all had cats. And it was almost like being in a tasting room, because people were making these kind of personal connections, and it actually felt like a little party. I don't have cats, so I felt a little left out, but
nice. I mean, so let me ask you, just if you, somebody who's not your client, and little, give them a little free advice, like what some winery, some small winery, and they're, you know, suddenly realizing nobody's coming to the tasting room. They've got to try and stay afloat, you know, and they feel like they can't afford to hire a PR firm. So let's assume that they can't, you know, what can they be doing?
my advice would be to, when they're reaching out to their clients, um, to offer something of value to them, whether it's a greater connection of relationship, whether it's more education about the wines. I've seen a lot of emails come into my inbox from many wineries I didn't know I was associated with. And I've seen some that say, kind of, please help support us during this difficult time. And I think it's really important to remember that everybody's going through a hard time right now, or could
Right.
be. Everybody is scared, whether it's about their own lives or about the lives of their family members who are in different states who they can't see. So by offering them some good and happiness, maybe it's, hey, we're sending out this great recipe that is easy to make from a pantry at home if you have any of our wines. Offering free shipping. I've seen a lot of wineries do that. And I know, while that's a sacrifice that's a big cost for wineries to have, if they're able to do that with their clients, I think that a little bit of generosity is going to go a really long way for them. So that would be my kind of advice in a nutshell, is to really think about, okay, how can I make this client's, this customer's life a little bit better during this situation? What would they want to hear from us? Because wine is something that really connects people, and it's the a reason why we all love it. And so I think there's a greater opportunity than ever to make those connections. And a lot of those times, those might be one-on-one. It might be a personal email saying, hey, checking in. I know a lot of wineries are making phone calls, direct phone calls, and I think that's great. So that would be my best advice, is what can we do for you? Because you're the customer. And I think wine is a hospitality business, and we have to always remember that.
Hmm. Yeah, the desperation. I think I tweeted about this the other day. There was an arts organization. I went to one of their shows in like 2008. Hadn't heard from a long time, and I get this email that says, "Do you care about us?" Like,
Right.
you know, you have no idea what my inbox looks like. No, I don't care about you. No.
Right.
So, you know, you do have to be aware that everybody, and I'm not special, everybody in the world is getting deluged with those emails. Before we end this conversation, I want to know a little bit more about you. How did you decide that you wanted to do wine PR for a living?
That's a really good question. I sort of fell into it. I'm going to say, when I graduated from college, I was a history major, and everybody I knew was going to law school, or they were working for consulting firms like Arthur Andersen. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. So I was in my student union at Northwestern, and there was a job, kind of big binder at the time, because this is before all of technology. And there was a job offer or opportunity at a wine auction house in Chicago called Davis and Company Wine Auctioneers, which today is Hart Davis Hart Wine Company. So I said, I love wine. I definitely grew up with it on my table every night growing up. And I applied for the job, and it was my first interview, my first job offer. And I took it, and I soon realized that the wine industry is huge. And you can really decide if you love wine, if you love food, you can decide what part of that industry is best fit for your skills and your personality. You could be a lawyer in the wine industry. You could be a distributor, more of a logistics side. And for me, I love to connect people. I love to talk. And so after 3 or 4 years working in the wine auction world, after I had a good base knowledge, I realized that there was this opportunity where I could find my own way within the business and really kind of identify where I was a good fit. So
yeah, it's what I assumed, that because you probably, if you'd gone to law school or worked for Arthur Andersen or something, you'd be making a lot more money, but you're doing this because you love wine.
yes, absolutely. I love it.
So, all right.
And I love the stories too. I love the people in wine. I always think they're so fascinating. You can have farmers who have been doing this for 3 generations. You can have people who have come from a super successful career elsewhere as, a CEO of a major company. And both are interesting to work with. Yeah, a lot of people in the music business come to wines for some reason, and that's fun too if you like music. So yeah, I think it's there's such a wealth of personalities in this that makes it a fun career.
That's definitely true for me as well. I mean, I've always been, almost always been a journalist, and I just find I was a sports writer for a while, and I love sports. Boy, am I missing sports! Last night I was watching something called the Puppy Bowl, and there was this puppy, and it was staying at Graceland. I'm not sure why. It was in the guest suite at Graceland, and they put an Elvis-like cape on it, and they took this puppy on a tour of Graceland. I thought, what the hell am I watching?
That's amazing. Now,
But
you lived in France, didn't you?
Yeah, I did volunteer work in France. That's when I fell in love with wine. I think most people who love wine, a lot of them have you obviously did in the United States, but a lot of them have a European origin story. I had been a sports writer, quit my job to travel around the world, was doing some volunteer work in France, and we just had wine every day. And I just fell in love with it. And then became like anything I'm into, whether it's music or whatever, then I became obsessed with it. And the more that I was into it, the more I realized it's more interesting to write about. If you write about sports, you have to deal with athletes who think you're the enemy. And I love watching sports, but then I've got to go in the locker room, and the guy just, he thinks all I can do is I'm just a nuisance. Whereas I have so many great conversations with intelligent, interesting, creative people in wine. It's great. Plus you get to drink wine, so there's that.
Yeah.
But
bonus.
Yeah. Well, Katherine, thank you for joining me. This has been another great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Blake. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks much.
Yeah. Bye.